Hey guys, it's April, and April is Autism, well, it's either Autism Acceptance or Autism Awareness Month, depending on who you ask. And I definitely am more into the Autism Acceptance side of things. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about our family's journey with autism and our experience with autism, and just kind of our entire experience, because I guess I've talked a little bit about Tessie and Tessie's, I've talked a lot about Tessie and Tessie's diagnosis. I've not talked as much about Maggie, mostly because she's a little bit older, but I wanted to talk a little bit, I wanted to go back. When our girls were little, I just thought that they were late talkers. I thought that both of our older girls were late talkers. And I talked about that a little bit in the post that I would really like every person to watch, which is the mom advice that I would like you to ignore, where I talk about how I wish I had gotten our oldest speech when she was little. And so yeah, I thought that our first girls were late talkers, and when Maggie was like 2.5, she still wasn't really talking at all. But the thing was, she had like 5 phrases, and they were like 2-word phrases. She would say like, come on, good girl, bad girl. Usually used to refer to her sister when she was mad at her. Good girl was to refer to herself when she was doing something she wasn't supposed to be doing. So like she would be getting into some sort of trouble, and she would be like, good girl, good girl, good girl, good girl. Good ma, which was like when she wanted something, she would say good ma to me. And then come on was for anything that she wanted. She would use come on, come on, come on, come on. And that was pretty much those. I'm trying to think there. And Mio Bear. Mio Bear was the name of her bear. And I know I heard her over the monitor saying Mio Bear and Bad Bear to her bear. Okay, so that could be like 6 phrases, 6 2-word phrases, and they were all 2-word phrases. So she didn't have any single-word phrases that she said, but she had 5 to 6 2-word phrases. And a lot of those I'd also heard her say, a lot of her speech I'd heard her say over the baby monitor and not so much out loud. She definitely did not like using her speech out loud, other than she would use it a little bit more like when she wanted something from me or when she thought she was like doing something she shouldn't do. Then you would hear her like saying it to herself, or like if she was mad at her sister. And this is when she's like 1 and Sadie's 3, 2 and Sadie's 4. When she was closing in on 3, the summer before she turned 3, that was probably when Paul says he started to get a feeling a little bit earlier. Before that, he will say he started to get a feeling before that. He didn't really say anything to me at that point. I filled out an early intervention referral for her a few months before her 3rd birthday. And at that point, it was coming up until summer. And so they sent it over to special education, and it got lost. And special education should have contacted us in the fall, and they never did. And so at that point I was waiting to hear from them, and we never were going to hear from them. And so it was fall, it was September, October, it was October, and I was still thinking we would probably hear from the special education department soon, when she got sick. And she was having her stomach was bothering her. She was having stomach problems, and I took her to the doctor, and we were going to a clinic that was the university's residency program. And the doctor came into the room, and she spent 45 minutes with us, talking to me and interacting with Maggie. And at the end of the 45 minutes of talking with us, and I remember she had this purple stethoscope, and she was like, oh, this thing is indestructible. There's nothing because I was like, don't give it to Maggie. Maggie can break anything. She's like, oh, this thing is indestructible. Maggie can't break it. Maggie pops it into pieces. And I think she could put it back together, but I was like, anyways, And the whole entire time, one of Maggie's stims at that point that started like that week, it was a brand new stim, was grinding her teeth. The whole entire time she was grinding her teeth really loud and just like taking apart the room. And yeah, she spent 45 minutes with us, and at the end of the 45 minutes, she said, I am 100% certain that she is on the autism spectrum, which I guess was pretty apparent, because when she would later go on to be tested, the results would say something like, I remember one of the tests that she took coming back and saying that she was in the lowest 0.5% for functioning of children on the autism spectrum at that point in time, which is not, I mean, functioning is kind of a fluid thing. It's not static. That is not where she is right now. She's not a child that anyone would call high functioning. She's not a child that like you would describe, that people would say like, oh, she has Asperger's. No, that's definitely not the life that we have with her at this point in time. She's not super verbal. I mean, if you've seen the videos that she does choose to be in, you know she's not super verbal. She doesn't have a lot of words, and her verbal communication is better than some kids, but it's not super great. And it's pretty focused and limited in scope to being about bubble guppies, and it's pretty much nouns usually, although sometimes it's like I want, maybe on a good day she can do it at school and at therapy. She can do I want or stuff like that, but she doesn't at home usually. Anyways, going back, I kind of jumped ahead. So it was pretty obvious to the doctor. Up until that time, I mean, she had other doctor's appointments. She had well child checks, but when we go in, they would be like, does she have 10 words? And I would be like, yeah, she has 10 words. She has 5 2-word phrases. And they would be like, okay, you're good to go. Thumbs up. That was the year before. That was her 2-year-old doctor's appointment. And so we kind of skated through. She did have 10 words. That's how we got to there. And so she gave me a phone number to call on like this paper that Maggie totally scribbled all over. I can't believe I could even see the paper. And the phone number was for testing, and it was like the absolute perfect timing because the testing for the program that was going to be starting had just started. And so basically I called, and it was within 2 weeks we had an intake appointment, and a week later we had her ADOS, and a week later we had her like intake appointment at the therapy center, and like a week later she was starting. And during this whole time, my reaction to all of this has always been like, what can I do to stay busy, to not go crazy, to not like, I try not to use the word crazy. What can I do to stay busy so that I can feel like I'm doing something? And I will admit that is how I deal with a lot. That is how I've gotten through a lot, is I have stayed busy. And that is why Tessie has had so many resources, and why she is in therapy at this age. Because I feel like if I'm scheduling things and I'm doing things, then I'm actually doing something to help, and I'm not just waiting, and I'm not totally useless to my kids. And so at that point in time, I Googled like, I don't know, Autism Michigan, and I found that there was a study at Michigan State that they were doing, and it was perfect because they were training parents. It was a study with the Autism Lab where they were training parents, and there's actually a video of me and Maggie demonstrating the training, where they're training parents on how to interact with their kids who are on the spectrum. And so we went there, and they tested Maggie, and we went through all these different tests, and we got accepted into the study. And basically it was like a training program over where we had a coach. I went through and I watched the videos, and I read the instructions, and I was lucky because I was in the group that had a Skype coach, and so she would like watch on Skype me and Maggie do the practices. of our interactions and trainings, and it was amazing. It was really, really good because it kind of taught me more how to interact. The program had a lot of like, we would play together, but it began with me imitating Maggie, and she was so excited about that. She was just like, when I started imitating her for the first time, I was supposed to imitate like the sounds she was making and the things she was doing, and she just stopped and came over and grabbed my face and kept looking at me. She was so excited. And so that was a really neat program, and it was really helpful. And so that was kind of the beginning. And so we went through that training together, and she started going to therapy, and it took a while to get her into OT and speech. And yeah, she started out, in the beginning she was going to therapy 6 days a week and then 5 days a week. And that was pretty much life. And Patch was already born at that point. When she started therapy, Patch was 1, and Sadie was 5, and she was 3. And then James was born. James did have some developmental problems, but they were like physical problems. Like Patch only had a speech delay, and Patch is like our most neurotypical kid. He's like the most social kid. Oh my gosh, what are they doing in there? I don't know if you can hear that. I think the camera actually just shook because of what they're doing in there. Yeah. So, it sounds like they're having fun. James was born, and he had like low tone hypotonia and hyperflexibility, and they said mild social affect at first. Like there were some flags on his MChat in the beginning and some concerns about whether or not he might have autism, but then he just kind of caught up socially. And I mean, he definitely has his little auditory sensory things, but like the school psychologist that came out here was shocked to hear that they'd ever had any concerns about him and possibly having autism. I mean, he's just, yeah, he's such a social little guy. And he's almost totally caught up with he's one of the reasons we have him in gymnastics now is to kind of give him a little bit more of a head start, because he was so low tone and hyperflexible and had severe tibial torsion. So he was definitely like behind and had a couple years of PT from the time he was tiny. But yeah, that's why he's doing gymnastics, and he'll probably do ballet next year with Patch. And then Tessie was born. If I'm totally honest, which I'm being honest here, we'd had 2 girls and we'd had 2 boys. And when they did the ultrasound, I had a feeling that Tessie was a girl, because with my girls I'd had morning sickness, and with my boys I did not have morning sickness. I had asthma with my boys. My asthma flared up I have asthma. It's very mild, except when I was pregnant with the boys, and it was bad when I was pregnant with the boys, and it's basically non-existent with the girls, but I had morning sickness with the girls. With Tessie I had morning sickness, and I did not have asthma. So when I went in for the ultrasound, I was like, she's a girl. And I was pretty confident that if she was a girl, she was going to have autism. And I wanted a girl. I wanted another girl. I mean, it was like missing pink things and imagining pink fluffy dresses, and going through Target looking at all the cute pink things and looking at all the pink dresses that I had packed away that we hadn't used in so many years. But it was very like, when they said that she was a girl on the ultrasound, it was also kind of like a heavy feeling, because I had a very strong feeling that she was going to have autism. In the beginning. In the beginning, all of her doctors probably would have thought that that was crazy, and I was paranoid, and they don't think that anymore. She was born, and I know I've talked about this, but it's definitely part of our autism story. She was born, and she was a scheduled C-section at 39.5 weeks. She's my 5th C-section. And it was easy. I mean, I'd been through this a lot of times before, but after she was born, she would nurse, and she just never really would be comfortable when she was being held from the time she was born. She would be very, very comfortable after I put her down, and she would fall asleep, and she would sleep and sleep and sleep in her baby bassinet, and I would like have to wake her up and nurse her, and she would nurse, and then she would not be comfortable on my chest. She wasn't like a baby who would fall asleep. Even in the hospital, she would not fall asleep and cuddle on my chest. She would like just squirm and squirm and squirm and be uncomfortable when she was touching me. And then I would put her down and she would go to sleep in the baby bassinet and be totally fine until like someone came in and changed her diaper and woke her up, or I changed her diaper and woke her up and got her up to nurse again. So I was sitting here holding her when she was not even 4 days old, because we were still in the hospital, and all I could think was that this was the easiest that it was ever going to be for her, because this world, just everything about it was going to be hard. I just knew that everything about it, from the sounds to the feelings to everything, was going to be hard for her. I just wanted to hold her and cuddle her, but that wasn't something that was particularly comforting to her. And so I did what I do. And right after she was born, well, first we took her home. I think she was like a week old when she was a week old when Maggie had her ADOS retest. Every year she has to have an autism recertification for the program that she's in. And so she had her test when she was a week old, and oh my gosh, she had a meltdown during it, and I almost got kicked in my C-section scar, and I was holding Tessie, and because Tessie was like on my chest, and it was kind of a disaster. And we did that, and then we had the meeting. So Tessie was 1 to 2 weeks old. And I remember telling everybody in the meeting that I was afraid that Tessie had autism, and everyone was like, there's no way. I mean, this was a conversation I was going to have so many times. There's no way you can tell a baby that little has autism, which is true. And I mean, it's so true. Everyone was right. Everyone who told me that was right. But at the same time, I knew. There was no taking away that knowing. And so she slept for like 3 months. She slept for like 6 months, but it was at 3 months. It was at 1 month that early on started, the therapists that were here for James's physical therapy started commenting on, we should probably have her evaluated. And in between 2 and 3 months, the evaluation process started getting rolling. And by 3 months, in that time, she was evaluated, and she had a really significant delay. She wasn't tracking with her eyes. When they rang a bell next to her, she didn't move. She just laid there. They clapped blocks right next to her, and she just lay there. She did not flinch. Like blocks, bang, bang, bang. Totally no reaction. Bell loud right next to her ear, no reaction. Bright toys above her head, back and forth right in front of her eyes. She was like 2 to 3 months old. No reaction, just laid there, perfectly still, looking up at the ceiling. Faces, people talking to her, just lay there looking up at the ceiling, no reaction. And her current therapist told me that, who wouldn't be working with her for another year, told me that when the 2 therapists who did that came in and presented on that, she said, I remember that. I remember when they came in and they were like, she either has significant hearing loss or a really significant developmental delay, because it was like not something they had seen before. And so probably at that point, part of it too was that she wasn't getting enough oxygen to her brain because of the central apnea that we didn't know about. She started therapy at 3 months old, weekly therapy at 3 months old, just about. And that was at the same time that I started reaching out to everybody that I knew, all the therapists, and basically every single person that I had any sort of contact with about autism with Maggie. I was like, hey, I have this baby and I think she has autism. I know she has autism. Please help. And everybody was amazing. Of course they were amazing. And most people were like, you can't really know, but we'll try to help you. And the autism lab at MSU was amazing in that they put together a list of studies for babies, and we're like, here's a list. Here are the best studies that we think would be the best for her. Why don't you contact them and see if maybe they can do something? And so we contacted 3 of the studies, Washington University, I have St. Louis, the Boston Children's Hospital one with Harvard, and one with Pitt University, and we ended up doing all three of them. And really, again, this goes back to like, I had to feel like I was doing something, because I really, her having therapy one time a week didn't feel like I was doing anything. And I mean, none of these studies were like invasive. They were pretty much developmental testing. One was an MRI while she was asleep, and one was an EEG while she was watching TV, and the other one was like her sitting there and picking up spoons while she was Skyping with somebody. Two of them were actually traveling, the Boston and the St. Louis one, and one of them, the Pitt one, was while she was on Skype. And so we did those, and we did therapy, and I waited for her to be 18 months old, and finally happened. And we found out that the wait list to get her tested for the program, for the autism program, was really, really long, and they wouldn't be able to test. I actually did like, okay, so usually your doctor gives you the referral at your 18-month doctor's appointment. But I was talking to some people who worked at the autism therapy place that Maggie goes to, and they were like, no, you need to get her on that list now. And so I knew it would take a few days to get a hold of the doctor, but when the person I was talking to at the therapy center emailed their friend who works in the office that does the testing, and they said, we are booking for July right now. And at that point it was October 2017, and they were booking for July 2018. And so she's like, no, call right now, call in the morning. So in the morning I called, and in the morning when I called, they said, and I was supposed to have a referral, and she's like, do you have the referral? And I knew our doctor had told me he was going to give me a referral, so I was like, not in my hand right now. Knowing that if they said come in right now, I could call our doctor's office and they would get it to me because they knew it was important. And she said, okay, I'll give you our next available appointment, August 8th, 2018. And I just like died inside. Like, I felt like I had worked so hard to get her early intervention, and everyone had been like, you know, patting me on the back like, Mama, you're doing such a good job, you're getting her in so early, you're going to get her therapy at 18 months, and you know how important that is. She's going to have therapy even earlier than Maggie did. She's going to start right at 18 months. It's going to be so good. Those first months are so important. They're so formative. And she wasn't even going to be tested until after her second birthday. I could have called when she was 12 months old and put her on that wait list, and we could have been going in right away. I was crushed. I was so upset. So the only thing I could do was I made the appointment for her 18-month doctor's appointment with her doctor to get the actual referral that I'd kind of lied about. Not actually lied about, because I did say not in my hand at the moment. And he had promised it to me. And then I made the appointment for us to go to Boston Children's for her to do her second visit for the study there for the EEG, knowing that they would be doing an ADOS there, an autism test, an unofficial autism test. And so we were going to Boston, and we were going to be flying there while my parents were there, just me and Paul and Tessie. And then what happened? There was that, what was it, like blizzard storm that weekend in Boston when the ocean was like flooding in, and it was horrible. It was like the first weekend in it was like the 6th, I think it was the 6th of January 2018, this last year. And everything was flooding, water everywhere. And I was like, Paul, let's drive. There was like 7 feet of snow on the highway in Erie, Pennsylvania that we would have had to get through. We never would have made it. I wanted to drive. Paul was like the voice of reason. He wouldn't let us. Okay, we had 2 flights that week. We had the first flight, and they called and canceled it. And then they said they could get us through the next day, and they called and canceled that because like everything was canceled that weekend. And then so they booked the hospitals, the people we were working with at the cognitive neuroscience lab got us in for the 13th, for the next weekend. Now my parents wouldn't be here for that, but Tessie and I could go by ourselves. So we were going to fly by ourselves, so we were going the next weekend, the 13th, the 12th and 13th. And so we got the tickets, they moved our tickets, they refunded one, and we were all ready to go. And that morning I woke up with a text message saying our flight had been canceled because of the storm that was expected in Michigan. And I looked outside and there was like an inch of snow. And the storm was supposed to be over like by noon. We were leaving at like 7. Come on, Michigan. And I was just done. I was done with airplanes at that point. So it was 6 a.m. and we packed up our entire family and we were in the car by 7 and we drove to Boston. And we made it. And we did the tests, and Tessie had her first ADOS, and she was diagnosed with autism. Well, not unofficially. They couldn't officially do it, but she unofficially, the ADOS showed that she had autism. The Mullen showed that she had autism and showed like developmentally, partially because she wouldn't really participate, that she was developmentally like 3 to 4 months in a lot of areas. But it made it look very, very scary, which was very good for us, because then I took that back, that thing that said Boston Children's Hospital, Boston College, Harvard, all these, names that carried weight, and I was able to send that to the place that does the testing, and they got Tessie in the next month instead of in August, and they tested her the end of February, instead of testing her in August. And got her in for her ADOS right away, got her in for her intake appointment later that week, and she started therapy in March instead of starting therapy in like September. So it still wasn't 18 months, but it was 20 months, which is amazing. I mean, every bit of time matters. And so that is how we got from there to now. And she had her OT evaluation a couple days ago. Yesterday? She had her OT evaluation, and actually the beginning of her speech evaluation, I just went over the thing with the speech therapist. She hasn't formally evaluated her yet. And so we're getting her on the road to starting speech. And that's where we are right now with Tessie. And on Maggie's end, Maggie is now in a special autism classroom where she is the only girl in a class with 5 little boys. And she loves her school, which she calls Pink School. And she loves her autism therapy, which she calls Mermaid School. That's pretty much her 2 favorite places in the whole entire world. And Mermaid School is where Tessie goes now. And that is the beginning of our autism story. And it's April. And I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say. And so this is the first of my autism posts for April, but I kind of wanted to start out at the beginning with the story of how we got here. As you can kind of probably see from the beginning, or from when I got a little bit more upset earlier in the post, I don't feel like autism is a tragedy. I don't feel like autism is a tragedy for our family. I feel like it's a difference in neurology that, well, probably more than 2 members of our family have. I wouldn't even hazard to guess how many members of our family have not neurotypical neurologies, but I would say that it's more than 2, and it's not a tragedy. Sometimes I feel like it's a tragedy the way that the world sees it, and that makes me angry and upset and sad and a lot of things. And that, I guess, is why I feel like April is so important, and that's why I keep talking. That's why I sit here and I turn on my little light and I turn on my camera and I talk. And you guys, well, some of you are probably still listening. I've been talking for a while. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna look at this thing and it's gonna be like 30 minutes long. I'm sorry. So much to say about autism, but during April, my goal is to do 2 posts a week about autism, and the rest of the week it'll be a normal blog, but I'm going for Mondays and Thursdays. I am going to tell you a little bit about our life and our experience with autism and our family. So that is all for today, And thank you for listening. If you've made it all the way to the end, I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.